Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for gathering and thank you for all your hard work. I understand you guys have done a lot. Michael and Jamie have kept me informed, and it's an honor to be able to give you just a few pieces of insight as you start this journey, or at least get into the hardcore facilitating the leadership for this, for your different schools and programs. I'm particularly impressed with the idea that you're going to be creating aligned assessment plans, and you've got this Grading for Learning handbook. That's very impressive that you're going to analyze assessment quality and really help teachers explore that, particularly through this 3.5 hour workshop you're going to facilitate back in your buildings. The planning calendar is all going to come together, I'm sure, because you've got good leadership to do that. But you all are quite committed and dedicated to this very important thing. And that's the way anything gets done in education, is through hard work of dedicated people. And wow, from everything I've heard, witnessed personally when I visited you before, but from what I hear from Michael and Jamie, you all are very, very dedicated and you've got the insight to pull this off. So know you've got that going for you. Let's take a look though at some of the advice, some of the insights that I might be able to share with you from working in other states. I apologize for looking down once in a while, but I wanted to write it out. I had about 4 pages of tiny print before I started doing this. I tried to coalesce it down to one page. We'll try our best, but if you'd like to talk about any of this stuff beyond today, know that I'd be up for a Google Hangout or Skype or email or phone call if you'd like to do that. So let's take a look. First and foremost, please, please get your staff to understand it's principles first, strategies and techniques, and policy second. So you have to understand what's going on in the situation, and then what am I going to do as a result of that? Remember, we talked about before, fair isn't always equal as one example. Grades must be accurate. A format can't render a false report. So I've got to change the format if I think it's going to render a false report. These are principles first. And your great gift, the really, truly, probably where the greatest impact will be, is to help teachers identify the principles inherent, then identify the recipes, the responses, the strategies and policies, their teacher behaviors as a result of understanding that principle. Of course, there will come times when you say, and the teachers say, well, I believe in this, but I'm doing this other thing. And you have to realize we're all moderate hypocrites. And that's a part of it because school wasn't meant to actually do this stuff. The school really conspires to protect the status quo, the child who gets it first, or the first idea we have. The idea that somebody might deviate, that's scary. So go ahead and set up a schema, a plan, but build in mechanisms to deviate from the plan as necessary, and don't see that as falling back or regressing. See that as just a different pathway that you're going to take. It actually results in great strength as you do that. The example that I used with you all, I believe, was the idea that a teacher could change the intended book of study. The whole grade level agreed to read that one book, but this other book would work better for this small subset of students. The teacher should have the autonomy to pull that off. To do that, only with the educational rationale, pedagogy, not whimsy, or they're not in a mood to teach that author. You get the idea. All right, let's take a look at a few more ideas. Second one is you really got to focus on moral imperative. If you give them just empirical data and logic, you might change a few minds, but the majority of minds will be changed when you have the empirical logic and data with the anecdotal evidence of moral or ethical concern. Suddenly they wake up and go, oh, I am knowingly falsifying a grade with that particular policy, and that actually sets up this child for failure, or gives a false sense they're incompetent or a false sense that they're competent. And that's not a great gift for the larger generation, especially the trophy generation, that false sense of competence. Okay, we want to be transparent. Grades are first and foremost communication. They are not compliance. They're not affirmation. They're not compensation, reward, or money, or anything like that. And most of the time when we've ever evolved in our thinking in any culture in a school building or a program, it's because we transcended the current operating metaphors. So take a look at those metaphors. One of the biggest ones is moving from compensation to communication, an accurate, honest report of evidence against a standard. Continuing on, some of your biggest hurdles will be, and you want to prepare your response to this. You want to practice the conversation that you'll have. So have somebody play the antagonist or the yeah, but Socrates person and come up with every scenario, just like they practice presidential debates and courtroom litigation. Here are the ones you want to get ready. The disaggregation, that they give a separate score for different grades at the top of the paper and in the grade book. That's going to be huge. Second, the idea of separating academic reports from non-academic factors. So no longer to weave in effort, behavior, and attendance, non-academic factors, or anything that's a teacher technique or teacher method into the academic report. Now, please remind your folks, that doesn't mean you don't report those things. You don't have positive and negative consequences for those things. What it means is, of course, that they're reported separately, and in that way, you actually elevate them, and students mature faster. That's really going to be important that you get that across, because what does every teacher want? Highly competent student, maybe even passionate, interested in the subject, but maturation. So self-discipline, responsibility, all those wonderful things we're trying to impart. And that happens when you do standards-based grading, especially the way you guys are going about doing it. All right, continuing on. Averaging. You're going to have to respond to the idea that we're getting rid of averaging because that is so entrenched. The math is so easy, but we've got to get teachers to not hide behind that math. Understand the distortive nature of averaging. The idea of a single sitting final exam, not a composite final exam where you have clear and consistent evidence over time. That's another principle. A lot of teachers, if you take Assessment 101, you'll get that. Redos and retakes. Prepare your rationale for every pushback on that. The idea of zeros on the 100-point scale. Zeros are fine as long as they're recoverable, but not on the 100-point scale. The students aren't getting something for having done nothing. We went through a whole sequence of that with the slides, but I can do that with you again if you'd like. Don't forget you have articles on that. And almost all this stuff, I have articles I can share with you. Stopping the averaging, there's an article. Redos or retakes, there's an article. Formative versus summative, there's an article. There's several on homework you can involve in there. And that's going to be one of the other pushback issues is how do we handle homework? If we don't count it a lot, the students won't do it. So now you've got to talk about, we've got to talk about what really motivates a student to do something. High school, middle school, elementary. Yeah, it's going to be like that. I think also you're going to have to talk about the factor of time. And again, I have an article on that I can send you if I haven't already. That there are ways to brainstorm to actually pull this off. You won't do it perfectly, but you can do it most of the time as you go through that. Don't forget, you're probably going to want to get rid of honor roll. Most of the time, the only reason we have honor roll is to satisfy the parents who request it. But honor roll, yes, I have an article on honor roll, is highly inappropriate in a standards-based world, especially when you're looking at growth over time. And when you're the motivation side, honor roll doesn't serve the purposes we think it serves. Understand, too, that in order for a teacher to accept these new ideas from you, they will have to first admit what they were doing was wrong or less effective than their ego thought it was. And that's a big concern. Do you create a culture where it's okay to revise your thinking in light of new evidence? That would be powerful. I would also suggest that you sort your own thinking before you actually get into this, because you have to reconcile what you're thinking yourself before you can actually work with others, or at least while you're working with others. You might hold one point of view, and then to what degree will you allow somebody to hold another point of view if you know it to be pedagogically ineffective or inappropriate or really damaging a student's learning experience? That's going to be huge. So go ahead and be candid with each other and say, I'm not really, I'm sure that I believe this or I accept this. Can you guys help me? That's going to help you all immeasurably, that you have this cadre that you can call upon to sort out your own thinking. And you want to be very clear. It's really hard to convince others of your conviction when you're kind of wishy-washy with it yourself. Now, you want to get rid of this telephone game. He said, she said, so on. You want to nip that stuff in the bud. Almost every time when I hear teachers, when I've been called in to work with a school district, my administration, that's a nice idea, but they won't let me do it. I go to the administration, they said, yeah, you can do that. That's why we invited you, Rick, to come in and talk. And they didn't realize it, or they took something farther, or they misinterpreted the department chair or some faculty meeting where there's a toss-away line. You really want to get a chance to try to clarify that and be attentive to that, be vigilant to the telephone game that could distort things. I'd also recommend that you honor what the teachers bring to the table. If you're dismissive of the wisdom, the insight that they bring to the table, the experience they bring, that's going to be a real problem because the defensive walls are going to go up. So you can say, Bob, how did you guys resolve that there? And did it work for you? How would you do it differently if you had it to do over again? Oh, can you tell me more about that? Rather than saying, you're wrong or that's inappropriate, the research doesn't back it up. Guiding questions. On the website, that's stenhouse.com/FAIE. Fair isn't always equal. I shared with you guys before, there's actually a facilitator's guide that shares some ideas about How do you deal with divisive questions about grading? Like you might sit in small groups and hand out cards that say, yeah, but, and that person has to be the cynic and poke holes in whatever the idea is, but you hand out just as many cards that say, yeah, and they have to take the idea and make it better. That would go a long way. Please try to get across to your folks that if it works in math in 10th grade, it works in language arts in second and in college. So many places they say, well, that would work in science, but it would never work in English. Nonsense. It works every single place. The assessment principles are universal. So I do the exact same seminar I did for you guys with college professors and kindergarten, transitional kindergarten, preschool, first grade teachers. It can totally be done. Continuing on, you have to wean teachers off a singular vehicle to demonstrate evidence. They get so wigged out about did they do the thing, which is compliance, and we're conflating compliance with mastery. Shouldn't. They should rally around evidence, not the vehicles used to represent evidence. And that's going to be a big migration, philosophical stance that changes. We have to answer every single one of their questions as they raise them up. And sometimes it'll be the same question we've answered 62 times or 600 times. And that's all right. So you've got somebody and you just say, please give me every awkward question, just one at a time. And I should try to vet it, to really explore what that is. And what I found is this. Most teachers totally accept it when they examine it to the third or fourth level. They don't accept it if they're superficial in their examination. So the goal for you guys is to get them a little bit deeper in what's going on and not just take the initial off-the-cuff reaction to it. I'm going to move my paper here just a little bit so you can see. Oh, scenarios and the hypotheticals, to actually set up all the weird scenarios that could happen and then brainstorm around them. I mentioned that briefly when I was with you guys, but that's golden. When they do that, then it really happens in the classroom. They have a ready reference in their mind. One, the diversity of opinion, but two, all these really cool ideas. So they're clear-minded when it's emotionally inert, and they hear what a colleague says, and thinking about what a colleague would do in a situation actually helps inform what you would do. But then do you have an avenue where they can debrief with somebody afterwards? Here's what I chose to do. What do you think of that? It's kind of like what doctors do all the time, is to sit down and debrief the case and do a case study. What was going on there as you did that? I would suggest you do think alouds as much as you can, which is kind of the same thing, kind of behind the scenes thinking. Why did you do what you did? When teachers have to explain their decisions and then publicly defend them against critique, wow, do they transform pedagogy? That's an element you want to include in what you're doing here. I think there are times when you have to choose between being a leader and being a boss. And I'm struck by what goes unachieved because we were playing it politically correct and choosing to simply be a leader and try to facilitate. A lot of people say 3 to 5 year plans, but what I'm thinking when I hear that is that means I'm going to sacrifice current students for the next 3 to 5 years until these teachers do this ethical thing, this pedagogically effective thing, and that's not acceptable. So I'm going to have to really deal with that, and I invite you to deal with that too. I'd also suggest that you ask teachers and parents and business leaders who might be concerned, how did you learn your craft? And walk through how they did that, and that they're evaluated by evidence, all these other things, and remind them that's all we're doing with students here, extending it to the next generation. All right, let's see if we've got anything. I think that does it, but know that for as long as you want me, I'd be a resource to this, and this is so worth it. I mean, whole lives, careers, functional families, not dysfunctional families, not a life of drudgery, but real meaningful lives where you could honestly say this school was magnificent and resulted in brilliant, compassionate, competent people, ethical people, courageous people are at stake. So no pressure. But seriously, this permeates all your core values in all of pedagogy and really will fundamentally change your community for the positive. Enjoy the journey and the new discoveries you make as you facilitate the journey of others. I am very, very grateful for all you're doing, as is all the leadership, I'm sure. Thanks, and enjoy.